empty valley, like a prayer half remembered. The sky hung low and bruised with the color of storm, and the horizon seemed to tremble under the weight of the coming rain. Ellis stood at the porch of his cabin, his worn hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the restless dusk. He was a man of few words, the kind whose silence said more than most men's sermons. The land had made him this way, quiet, deliberate, shaped by loss and long seasons of solitude. His only company was the steady groan of the barn's door and the crackle of a fire that burned mostly for habit, not warmth. He turned when he heard the faint sound, something small, hesitant, out of place in all that wild hush. A knock. Then another, lighter, as if made by trembling hands. Ellis's brow furrowed. He reached for the rifle leaning by the wall, though even that gesture was slow, uncertain. When he opened the door, lightning flashed behind the figures standing there. 2 children, a boy and a girl, their clothes wet and dirt-streaked, eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't belong to childhood. Between them stood a woman leaning on a broken fence post for balance, her face pale under a hood, her body marked by exhaustion and something worse, pain. The girl's voice was the first thing that moved the silence. "Sir, if we cook for you, would you let Mama stay here? She's too bruised to walk." The boy echoed softly, as if repeating a prayer he didn't understand. Ellis looked at them a long moment, at the woman who could barely stand, at the small hands clutching the edges of a threadbare shawl. He said nothing. Words, he'd learned, often made things worse. He simply stepped aside and opened the door wider. The children hesitated, then led their mother inside. The smell of rain followed them, mixing with smoke and pine. The woman collapsed near the hearth, her breath shallow, her arms still reaching out for her children even as her eyes fluttered closed. Ellis knelt beside her, checked her pulse with the carefulness of a man who had once known how to tend both wounds and hearts. The bruises on her skin were deep, ugly things, old and new, all tangled together. He covered her with a wool blanket, stoked the fire higher, then turned to the children. "What's your names?" he asked quietly. The girl whispered, "Mia." The boy, Mo. "And your mama?" "Alina." He nodded once. "You'll be safe here tonight." That night stretched long. The storm broke open above the valley, wind rattling the shutters and rain beating the roof like fists. Ellis sat by the fire, watching the woman's chest rise and fall, listening to the children's small breaths beside her. He didn't sleep. Something in him had changed the moment he opened that door, a stirring he didn't trust. He had spent years building walls no one could climb, and now 3 strangers slept within them. Morning came in gold and silence. When Alina woke, she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling, the sound of birds outside, the warmth on her cheek. Her body ached, but for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. She saw her children sleeping near the hearth and a man at the table, carving wood with patient hands. He looked up briefly, nodded toward a bowl of broth. "Eat while it's warm." She tried to thank him, but her voice cracked. "Rest," he said simply. "You needn't talk." She watched him through the day, how he moved, measured, efficient, unbothered by her presence, yet aware of it. The children followed him shyly as he fixed the fence, fetched water, brushed down the horses. When Mia tried to help, he didn't stop her, just guided her hand on the bucket handle. Quiet instruction wrapped in gentleness. Mo giggled when the smallest colt nuzzled his palm. For a moment, laughter lived again in that lonely yard. By evening, Alina insisted on cooking. She stood, still unsteady, and asked where he kept his flour. He hesitated, but pointed to the cupboard. Soon the scent of cornbread filled the cabin, something Ellis hadn't smelled since his mother's hands had shaped dough by this same fire decades ago. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, shared, almost companionable. She thanked him softly before turning in. He only nodded. Days folded into weeks, the rhythm of healing blending with the rhythm of the ranch. Ellis mended fences, while Mo carried nails in a tin cup. Mia gathered wildflowers and placed them in a cracked jar on the table. Alina washed, cooked, mended torn clothes, each motion slow but steady, like a woman relearning life. The bruises faded, but not all of them. Some lay deep, where no eye could see. Ellis never asked about them, though the questions lived in his gaze. He simply made sure the woodpile never ran low and that the water stayed clean. Sometimes she caught him watching her when she smiled, just a flicker, a quick turn away, as if her smile was a light too bright to face. One morning at the well, a stranger's shadow crossed the sun. A man from town, half drunk, squinted at her. "Thought I knew that face," he muttered, then grinned with something cruel behind his teeth. She turned without answering, her heart pounding. That night, she told Ellis nothing, but he saw the tremor in her hands when she served supper. Later, checking the fence, he found tracks, horses, fresh. He didn't like it. Trouble had a smell, and it was close. Rain came again, heavy, unending. Alina sat by the window, staring out into the dark. Ellis brought her his coat, laid it around her shoulders, and stayed beside her in the quiet. "You don't have to help us," she said finally. He looked into the fire. "Sometimes we help because no one helped us." The words hung there, soft but unshakable. She nodded, tears she hadn't meant to shed sliding down her face. For the first time, he looked at her fully, not as a guest or burden, but as someone carrying a story too heavy for one heart alone. Before dawn, hoofbeats thundered down the valley. 3 riders, rough-voiced, shouting over the wind. Ellis saw them from the barn. He knew their kind, men who lived by taking what pain had already half stolen. He walked inside, calm, every motion deliberate. Alina froze when she saw his face. "They found us," she whispered. "Take the children inside," he said. His tone left no room for fear. He loaded his rifle with steady hands. The men rode up fast, reeking of whiskey and arrogance. One leaned forward in the saddle. "Heard you're keeping a woman belongs to us." Ellis stood on the porch, rain dripping from his hat brim. "Ain't no one here you can take." The man spat. "Move aside, rancher." Ellis didn't move. Lightning flashed, white across the sky, and for a heartbeat everything was frozen. Their faces, the trembling horses, the storm waiting to break. Then the lead rider drew his gun. Ellis fired first. The shot cracked through the rain. The man cried out, clutching his arm, his pistol dropping into the mud. The others turned, startled. One raised his weapon, but Ellis's voice cut through the thunder. "Next bullet won't miss." They hesitated, cursed, then turned their horses, retreating into the downpour with promises to return. The valley fell silent again, except for the rain. Inside, Alina held the children close, shaking. When Ellis stepped through the door, water streaming off him, she ran to him before she could think. He was bleeding, a shallow graze across his shoulder. She pressed a cloth to it, her hands trembling. "You're hurt?" she whispered. He shook his head. "Not much." Her touch lingered longer than it needed to. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared. In that brief silence, something unspoken bridged the space between 2 lives long starved of gentleness. That night, he sat on the porch, rifle on his lap, eyes on the dark ridge beyond the field. Alina watched from the window, the children asleep beside her. She whispered, "God sent us here." He didn't hear her, but somehow he felt it. The land breathed differently now, still wide, still wild, but not lonely. When morning came, it was clear and bright. The danger had passed, at least for now. Ellis took Mia and Mo to the stables, showed them how to brush the horses, how to listen for their breath. Their laughter rose like birds. Alina stood by the fence, sunlight warming her face. For the first time since her world had burned, she smiled without pain. That evening, as the sky melted from gold to violet, she walked out to where Ellis was mending a gate. She thanked him for everything, for saving them, for letting them stay. "I'll leave soon," she said. "I don't want to be a burden." He looked up, eyes shadowed by the brim of his hat. "You're no burden, Alina. You brought back sound to a house that forgot how to breathe." She tried to answer, but her throat closed around the words. He stepped closer, the air between them trembling with things neither dared name. "You don't have to go," he said softly. "You, and those little ones. You're the only reason I don't hate the quiet anymore." Her tears fell freely now, hands twisting in the fabric of her dress. Ellis, I don't know if I can love again. Then don't, he said. Just stay. Sometimes staying is enough. The wind moved through the grass like a sigh. The world held still as if listening. Mia's voice broke it. Mama, can Mr. Ellis live with us forever? Alina laughed through her tears. Ellis knelt, drew both children into his arms. The fire from the cabin glowed behind them, painting the walls with warmth. Alina stepped forward and touched his shoulder lightly, the same one she had bandaged. Thank you, she whispered, for giving us back a place to breathe. He turned his hand and found hers waiting. The night spread wide, stars shimmering over the quiet land. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady, its light touching 4 faces instead of 1. Outside, the prairie stretched endless, no longer empty, just vast enough to hold their healing. If you're listening to this tale by your own fire somewhere, remember, kindness is still out here, waiting beneath the dust and thunder. Maybe the West was never wild at all. Maybe it was just waiting for hearts brave enough to be gentle. Tell me, friend, where are you hearing this story tonight? If it touched you, leave a sign in the wind. Your town, your name, your small piece of sky. Because stories like this one live only when they're shared.